the whole thing, I didn't expect it to be quite so involved. But in any event, I'll be happy to tell you that I came here in 1938 with my younger sister, who 2 years younger, to live with strangers, actually. But a little background. The town I come from is a small industrial town not too far from Stuttgart. You may have heard of Stuttgart. And the famous Märklin toy trains that a lot of people know about were made there, and they're still being made there as far as I know. Skipping ahead about, let me refer to my notes. That information I think I've got somewhat later. Am I doing it right? Yeah. Population was between 20 and 24 or 25,000 people. And there were approximately 400 to 450 Jewish people in the community. And we had a very cohesive Jewish the congregants, and a lot of them were in business. Fortunately, some
hold it very close.
Very close. Okay. You must excuse me. I've never done this before. Subsequently, I found out that between 1933 and 42, about 230 of the original 400 to 450 emigrated, most of them to the United States. After 1942, 37 Jewish people were left in town. The others were deported to camps, work camps, concentration camps, etc. And later on, I think there was something like 90 that are published in. I have a book that I'll pass around. That one, yes. There are a few markers in it, and you can. It's self-explanatory. After 1934 or thereabouts, you couldn't go to school anymore past the age of 14. I came here in 1938. The general population pulled together, and there were some classes organized for Jewish children who weren't able to go to school. You could go until I think you were 14. And at that stage, I was already past 14. And at one point, my parents arranged for me to take cooking lessons with someone my father knew who had a restaurant. My father had a business. He never wanted to leave Germany. And he also felt that it couldn't get that bad. After I was already here, and of course finding out much later, he was picked up at Kristallnacht and taken to Dachau. And then my mother was approached about his business. And she said she couldn't do it. If he was released, he would handle it. Of course, there was no money transfer, but they did release him. At the time, some towns were considerably worse with regard to being strict about not talking to you. I remember hearing that some people came to the back door to still do business with my parents. But we also had a second storefront, and they posted 2 SS men in front of the place. So there was a real boycott that people could not come in. Or they wouldn't feel, if they were seen by somebody going in, then they were punished or ostracized. And the same thing happened actually with school in the early 30s when I was still in school, 33, 34. Your friends that you always spent time with, they just stop talking to you. It's like you didn't exist. In any event, to make a long story short, my mother had 2 younger brothers who had emigrated to the United States in the late 1920s, and they had come back to visit occasionally. And they urged us to, they urged my parents to apply for visas. They would give an affidavit, and they arranged for distant cousins who lived in Cincinnati, whom we had, of course, never known about. There was an earlier emigration in the late 1800s, and it seems that my grandfather's brother had emigrated at that time. And these distant cousins were now offering to take my sister and I in to live with them. Of course, they didn't speak a word of German, and our English was very fractured. We had to learn it really fast, and I think I attribute my lack of a European accent to having learned English in Cincinnati within about 8 or 9 months. I went to work for this man in his business doing clerical work and taking some classes at night in both English and American history. I couldn't wait to apply for citizenship, but you had to wait until you were 18 before you could apply for citizenship. And then you had a 5-year wait. At that point, I was, in May 1939, fortunately, my parents and my youngest sister were able to get to the United States. It was very difficult at that point to get visas. You needed an affidavit so that you didn't become a ward of the state. The United States required that. I have no idea how those requirements have changed by now. Let me think. What else did I want to tell you? My sister and I were put on a train by my parents, who had booked the trip, and we took the train to Antwerp. I still remember somebody coming through the train asking for our passports. At Antwerp, we boarded an ocean liner, the name of which I couldn't recall. And we landed in New York on the West Side Piers in late July 1938. My 2 uncles picked us up and had rented a room for us somewhere before taking us to Cincinnati. A few weeks later, we met some other distant relatives. I have lost touch with all of those people. I have even lost touch with the people in Cincinnati because they had, after we went back to New York, they had no interest in keeping up relationships. We tried, but They had no interest, obviously. They had one daughter who then had to share her room with a stranger, and I could just imagine how terrible she felt about that. I also didn't realize until I had children of my own and they were teenagers what my parents did for us to let us go, because you just don't think that way. As a teenager, you're excited, you're going somewhere new, even though it was scary. But the fact that they had no idea what was in the future, and subsequently mail was very sparse and it was censored, which my parents were not in a position to do. And besides that, my father wasn't too interested in it. I recall hearing about this. One of my mother's friends was driven to the Swiss border, and there was an exchange of money, but that they had already had in Switzerland, so that she could get out. I mean, those things you find out about later, but my parents were not in a position to take money out, besides the fact that my father didn't want to leave. After he was in Dachau, he definitely wanted to leave. I don't know what else you'd like to know. If you'd like to ask me any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
How did he get out of Dachau? How did he get out? How was he able to leave?
That's a whole other story. The short fact of that is that my mother had a younger sister who in the 1920s married an American man who worked for the consular service. And she was able, and she became an American citizen at that point, or in the early 30s, and she was able to pull strings. Otherwise, they would have never gotten out.
Can you tell us a little bit about Rosalind when you came here? Because you wrote a beautiful story for our Subscribe a number of years back. I think everybody should hear what
Rosalind was a small, sleepy town. Rosalind Road was 2 lanes and no traffic lights, and very quiet. No. That's.
What time? When did you move here? You said you.
What time did I?
What year? You and your husband, and why did you come out here?
Why did we come out here?
And what year was that?
That was 1952. It was about 6 months after we married that our rent was being raised in an apartment, and his garage rent was being raised, and he was annoyed, and he said, "We're going to look for a house." And we took some drives, and we liked the area.
And don't forget to tell them who got your into Temple Sinai.
My friend Doris introduced me to Temple Sinai. But that was a few years later, because it had to wait until our children were in nursery school together.
Don't tell them the year.
Temple Sinai had a nursery school right from the very beginning, I believe.
That's where I met you.
Yeah. You probably know more of that history than I do. I think you've all heard enough. Is there anything else?
Thank you very much.